All right, paragraph 7, property condition. This is probably one of the, well, there's a portion of this that's filled out wrong all the time.
All the time.
All the time. So, access for inspections and utilities. Tell me about that.
So this is saying that the seller will agree to give the buyer reasonable access to the property.
What's reasonable?
Reasonable during business hours is reasonable.
Okay. How far in advance is reasonable to let them know?
Well, it depends on what your option period is.
Okay.
So if you've requested a quick option period from the buyer to get their inspections done quickly, you need to reasonably let them in quickly, whether that's within 24 to 48 hours.
Can I only have access during the option period?
No.
When can I have access?
Whenever you can make an appointment that is agreed upon between both parties.
So I could do this throughout the entire contract?
That is correct. You can inspect any time. The only time you'd have right to amend based on that would be during your option.
During your option, exactly. Okay. And is there a max number of times that I can go and view the property if I wanted to?
No.
No, there's not. Use common sense though. If your buyers want to go and see the property every single day, encourage them to drive by and wave at it, because it's just not feasible for the seller to be able to pack up and get everything if the buyer wants to come and visit the house every single day. I understand sometimes you'll have your mother-in-law, your father-in-law, your parents want to come and see the house. Just make an appointment.
Yeah, try to do it once and try to get all your measurements done at once.
Exactly. All right, so let's go to B, seller's disclosure notice pursuant to 5.008 Texas Property Code, which, by the way, if you ever want to look at the Texas Property Code, you can order a copy of it. It's about that thick, or you can go online and look at exactly what the property code is. This is a good example of something to know about the property code. So, how many different instances are there when you wouldn't need a seller's disclosure notice in the state of Texas?
3.
Actually, there's a total of 11.
Yeah,
but 3 are most common.
That's right.
Yeah. So you check box number 1 if they have received the notice. So this means it was uploaded into the MLS.
And as a listing agent, you really want that one checked before executing.
Exactly. And then box number 2 is they have not received the notice, and within a certain amount of days after the effective date of this contract, seller shall deliver the notice to the buyer. What's a common number to put in there?
So I never put more than 3 because I always want to see it before the inspection.
Yeah, you definitely want to see that before the inspection. Another thing to do, make really good friends with somebody who is who's an insurance person and sells insurance, because another good common practice is to reach out to an insurance person and ask them for what's called a clue report.
CLUE.
Casualty loss something. Casualty loss something. But anyways, on that clue report, it's going to tell you if any claims have been made, and how much damage they paid out for any claims that were made, and the nature of the claim that was made. So let's say that you see something that has water damage, and you didn't necessarily see that in the seller's disclosure. It could be that something came up before that person even owned the home or something like that. But it's important to get that before you have your inspector go out there, so you can say, hey, here's what the clue report said. If you could be extra cautious and look for anything that might look like this, I'd really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, and then the third one is the seller is not required to furnish the notice under the Texas Property Code.
So what are the 3 most commons not required?
If it's an estate.
An estate, what kind of estate?
An estate that is held in a trust.
Very good, with an attorney, yes.
I'm blanking on the other 2, but I'm going to put all 11 at the end of this video.
Okay, so the other ones are new homes.
There you go, new homes.
And bank-owned properties. So when we get back into the foreclosure, which I'm expecting this fall, they do not have to fill out a seller's disclosure.
There you go. All right, so, and I always keep that handy for people who ask that question, which is why I'm going to put all of those 11 instances on here, and you're going to have questions about what some of those instances even mean. Come and see us and we'll walk you through it. Okay, and then seller's disclosure of lead-based paint and lead-based paint hazards. What in the world is that?
So there is one special year, 1978.
Okay.
So any home built prior to 1978 has a possibility of having lead-based paint, because at that time the paint companies used lead in some of their paints.
Yeah.
So we have to
It
disclose.
made them look really bright, though.
It did, and it lasted forever. Lasted forever. So you do have to disclose to the buyer that there is possible lead base in that.
Yeah,
So,
and it's actually a $10,000 fine to the brokerage for each instance that they sold a home that was built 1978 or no, before 1978, and this form was not provided for. Now, you want to know a quick little story about this. There is a group in Waco who happens to have a TV show, and it rhymes with Schmagnolia. And they had somebody from the EPA was really bored one weekend and watched this show that was on a television network that is featured about home and gardens. And when they sat and watched this, they ended up just counting all of the different instances when they were watching this marathon of this show that the lead-based paint was not disclosed to any of these people. And then they went back and notified this company about all of the fines that they were going to be receiving. They ended up reaching an agreement, though. So if you go and watch this show, you will see an entire episode about the dangers of lead-based paint. So
that's right.
There you go.
Yeah.
Anyways, all right. So the next thing on here is the paragraph D, which is acceptance of property condition. As is means at the time, at the present condition of the property, with any and all defects and without warranty, except for the warranties of title and the warranties in this contract. What in the heck does that mean? Here's what it means. The home must be in the condition that it was in on the day y'all signed this contract. So if you go in the backyard and the pool is pristine and it's blue, and then you show up the day before closing and it's green and there's mosquitoes, that is not as is as of the time that you signed this contract, and you would have the ability to go back and say, hey, we're not closing until you fix this. And they couldn't come back to you and say, well, it's going to cost you this much money for us to fix it, because they didn't live up to their end of the contract.
Absolutely, and that includes any damages that movers could make while they're moving
Correct.
you out of the property.
Correct, which is why, then we'll get into some other addendums later, but closing and funding is an important one for taking possession of the property and not doing like a temporary lease. Although those things need to happen sometimes, make sure that you have the appropriate deposit for instances that come up like that. Now, then there's two checkbox here. Buyer accepts the property as is, and buyer accepts the property as is, provided seller at seller's expense shall complete the following specific repairs and treatments. Now, if they check one of these, can they still have an inspection?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You can have an inspection on both of them. Number two is when you would list something that's very obvious that needs to be replaced, whether it be broken windows or missing air conditioning or missing microwave or some repair that you can blankly see before the inspection, and the buyer says, I wouldn't buy this house unless that repair was made. Yeah. That's where that would go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, now with a missing microwave, that would be one of those like built-in microwaves.
Exactly.
Yeah. So and best practice for that is if you're walking up to a house and it's obvious that something needs to be replaced, and that's the only way that your buyer is going to end up buying that home, notate that on the contract when you submit your first offer, because otherwise you could be wasting their option money by trying to wait and do that later. Because if you're coming up to me and you're going to say, and let's say I'm representing the seller, and you're going to say, well, we want a discount on the home now because there's a missing front door, I'm going to look at you and be like, the front door wasn't here when you put the offer in on the home. So just remember, that's a pretty common courtesy to take care of that on the front end.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, so lender required repairs and treatments. What in the heck is that?
So lender required is anything that the appraiser goes out when they do their little inspection and their little appraisal checklist that they require to be repaired before the lender will lend on the property.
Okay, so who pays for that?
Usually the seller, but I've had buyers pay for it.
Yeah, and it's not a requirement of either party to actually pay for it. If there are, the third-party financing addendum will address more on this, but it could be the seller, it could be the buyer, it could be both that pay for it. If you, not saying to do this, if you wanted to chip in and pay for the repair, you could. This contract allows you to do that because it doesn't address who has to pay for it if a lender required repair comes up. It just has to be addressed before the lender will lend.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so completion of repairs and treatments. This is important, y'all. It must be done by somebody who is licensed, or if a license is not required, professionally engaged in the activity for which the repair must be completed. So if you have if you're going to list a house or something like that, you can have a handyman come and address electrical and stuff like that beforehand. But once you are under contract, it must be somebody who is licensed in the state of Texas to do electrical or to do plumbing. Or if you're going to have a roof replaced, it can't be your buddies and you're going to give them a case of beer over the weekend to replace a roof, unless you are engaged in that professionally. In which case, because you're an owner of the property, get it in writing that they're okay with you doing that. But roof licenses are not required in the state of Texas.
Sadly.
So make sure, sadly, exactly. So make sure that you choose a roofing company that is professionally engaged and has a proven track record of sticking around in the area.
So let me ask you this. Would you tell a seller, I'm sorry, you can't fix your own property?
Well, not necessarily.
Okay.
Depends on what the repairs are. If there are minor things and both parties agree that the seller can do those things and they agree to it in writing, it's going to be okay.
And that's the key, is to agree to it in writing.
Yeah. And is there an addendum for that? No. It just needs to be something in writing. If you write it on the back of a napkin, take a picture of the napkin. But it has to be in writing by both parties, because the last thing you want to do is allow the potential for litigation on something that
Absolutely.
doesn't need to be litigated. All right, environmental matters.
So on acreage, we've run into this several times, especially in Johnson County and far northern Tarrant County, where people have allowed their properties to be used as dumping grounds. So we actually had a gentleman who had for years allowed people to bring their old cars out there, their old tires. That's huge.
Yeah.
And it's very expensive to have that type of cleanup done.
Yeah, keep in mind, like, if a gas station were to go out of business or to close, or they were to sell that property, it's hundreds and thousands of dollars to mediate the area where those tanks were. And it's the same thing. If you've got a piece of property and there have been cars sitting out there leaking all over the place, there have been tires sitting out there, that is a big environmental hazard. And to fix the issue, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to do that.
The last property that we had this come on, it was $785,000 to clean it up.
Wow. And what did the property sell for?
1.2.
Woo! Okay.
Yeah.
Chokes you up, doesn't it?
Chokes me up every time.
All right, and then the last portion of paragraph 7 is residential service contracts, most commonly referred to in our industry as home warranties, although there's nothing about it that's an actual warranty. It is a residential service contract, and they must be licensed in the state of Texas
They
to
must be.
actually offer a residential service contract. This right here is just it's a contract that you have that you pay a certain amount of money for. Oftentimes it's somewhere between $450 and $750 depending on the kind of coverage you want. And it allows for the buyer to basically have a discounted rate for somebody to come out and do additional repairs that may be needed. Let's say that they've got an electrical outlet in their laundry room that's not working right and they can't connect their dryer. Usually it'll be like a $60 to $75 trade call fee, and then when the electrician comes out, that's all it's going to cost them usually. Now, this is why it's important to also keep a copy of your inspection report, because if they ever come back and say, well, we're not going to cover that because it's a pre-existing condition or something like that on the property, then you can go back to the inspection report and say, actually, when I purchased the home, when under contract, it worked. Same thing with your air conditioning unit. This is probably the one that home warranty companies or home service contracts like to deny the most, because it's the most expensive thing on your home. So make sure that not only you negotiate, not only you get your inspector to,
Right.
to review it, but also negotiate to have it serviced before the home closes so that you can also verify through that invoice that it was indeed in working condition at the time that you closed on the property.
Another reason why it is so important to get a licensed person so that the home warranty residential service contract company can say it was done by a licensed person.
Correct.
So
Correct.
they'll take it as gospel.
And HVAC is a licensed service in the state of
Absolutely,
Texas.
absolutely.
All right. You know what? Yeah.
What else is really good about that? The getting a residential service contract.
It's one less person. It's one less person to call you if something's not working.
What else?
It's a CYA for the seller.
And what else?
I don't know. What else?
It helps you if we ever have an E&O claim.
There you go. There you go.
So make sure that you have at least offered it and you have proof that you have offered it to the buyer.
Correct. And our policy, not our policy, actually our E&O policy requires that if you're selling your own personal property,
Yes.
you must give them a home warranty. You must fill out a seller's disclosure, and you must. What's the third thing?
Seller's disclosure, home warranty. There isn't a third thing, is there?
Nope. There you go. Two things: seller's disclosure and home warranty. Got to make sure that you do that every single time, because that's what covers you.
Well, you have to disclose in the contract that you're.
Well, yeah.